Cool. I hit the button. So this is exercise 1 of, Catherine?
Are we doing, oh, you just said exercise 1, my bad, sorry.
Yep. That's right. All right. Exercise 1. And so the README says we're starting with candy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the candy first. R spec, candy spec. Cool. It says uninitialized constant candy. That's fine. I made the candy file just because I didn't want to do that so I can get my window set up. Personally, the way I like to work is in this 2/3, 1/3 configuration, where the bottom third of my screen is the terminal. The top 2/3 are my editor. I also like to split my screen down the middle and have my test on the right-hand side and my code on the left-hand side. I don't really, I don't know why I like the test on the right-hand side. I know that like at some point I'd like to have tests on the left-hand side, and at some point I switch that, and I don't know why. But I just do it this way, and that's how I do it. So if you feel that you need your test on the left-hand side, cool. Like I'm like, all right, so I don't know why I picked this. It's just the way I do it. Marla?
Yeah, this is a very small question, but
Sure.
I tried to figure out a way to do the 2/3 on top and 1/3 on bottom with rectangle, and I could not, it did not like show me that option automatically. Is there like a link or something that I can look at how to do that, or maybe something else?
Yeah, the 2/3, 1/3 thing is just like, that's just arbitrary. Like that's just worked out for me. I use a program called Divi with 2 V's. That is from the Mac App Store. I think it costs like $5. There is a free one called Spectacle. Yeah, the main reason why I want both of these on my time is that, I mean, both of these at the same time, is that I want to be able to, write my code, but see my last error message at all times. I think that if you have things on a different window, you're switching between the two, that's like a mental context switch. And when programming, I try to avoid context switches as much as possible. This is kind of like why we all strongly recommend that you learn your keyboard shortcuts. Every single time you reach for your trackpad or your mouse, that's a mental context switch. So try to have everything in one place, so you just glance over and you have that information for you. Again, going back to that 2/3, 1/3 things, that's just an arbitrary number. I just like it. I'm a person like who like the car stereo, the volume has to be like an even number or a 5 or a 0. So like the 2/3, 1/3 thing, like really like, yes, so the number is so even, so perfect. It doesn't have to be.
No,
Right.
totally. I like the 2/3, 1/3 because right now I have it set up half and half, but I feel like I would like
Half
to
is
see
too
more
much.
of my, I would like to see more of my atoms. So I couldn't figure out how to get rectangle to adjust it to more though. So I was curious.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with rectangle, so I couldn't speak to it particularly. Before I learned about Divi, I would lay things out by hand and just like drag, and that's just, it was annoying.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I refer to TD often as just this big game of whack-a-mole, right? So I'm just going to whack them moles. So I have this error message. This error message popped up. I'm going to whack it. I know that uninitialized constant candy means I make a candy class. And we see this wrong number of arguments given 1 expected 0. I think you'll note that we don't have an it exists test. Nope, we don't have an exist test here, right? And so, like usually as you get further along, I feel that the exist test is something people sometimes skip, because if it doesn't exist, like this won't pass, right? If there's no candy class, like that's not going to work. And then we also go into this idea of this concept called polymorphism. And the quick summary of this idea called polymorphism is that if we're looking at this test period just by itself, if this whatever object returns the candy type Skittles and can do a different kind of candy, right? Does it matter if it's a candy object? If it does what you want it to? Like, example. Let's say I have a steak knife class and I'm eating steak with it, but I don't have any steak knives, and I use a butter knife, but it still cuts my meat, right? Does it matter really that it's a butter knife? Presuming they cut as well, right? If it does the thing, if it, the phrase people use that if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, and no, it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and something else like a duck, like it's a duck. For all intents and purposes, it's a duck. It doesn't really matter what it is. So this is one instance where you'll see like people may or may not use the exists test to verify that's kind of object. Arguments can be made either way. It really kind of depends on your intent. So we see this error message. We've done this many, many times before. Wrong number of arguments given 1, 0. Oops. F in it EOIs. It's a type, right? And I'm just gonna like take some extra steps. And we run the test and we see that we have the 1 passing and the 1 skipped. And I'm going to just unskip this one by moving that X, saving it, running it, and we have both passing. Any questions about process or anything so far? Oops. Michael?
Yeah, I had just a quick clarifying question on the setup of the candy spec file.
Yeah.
So on line 10, or the very top, the require R spec, when that's there on line, what I see is line 2, that capital R, capital S spec on line.
Yeah, so the numbers are like relative to where my cursor is, and that's how that works. Okay. So this would be like line 4, right?
No, I see. I got you. So on that line 4, that R spec, if it's gone, the file still runs in R spec. Is adding that there just like a layout thing that Turing prefers, or should we always have it?
I like it. Like a lot, like yeah, like you said, you don't need it, but like I kind of like it. It's just a personal stylistic thing. That's my habit.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Dane?
Yeah, do you mind maybe just maybe telling a little bit about the difference between require and require relative? I don't exactly remember what require relative and then the 2 dots does.
So require means like, hey, we are going to require from your system, like what's called a system path is where your system, your computer system by default looks for things. And so what this is saying, like, hey, computer, you know where you store all your Ruby stuff? Go look in there for RSpec. And so usually when we require files, usually this is a little different. And this is because this exercise is structured the way it is. We have to use require relative, but usually you'll do something like this. Right, does that look familiar? So when you have the dot slash is this signifier for saying from where I am running RSpec, now go into lib and then look for the candy file. Right, that is what, so require is saying by default without that dot slash, require is going to go look in the system path, like the place where by default your computer system will go look for software. By putting that dot slash in the require, you're saying like, no, don't do that. What you're going to do is that from where you are running your application, and usually that's going to be the root directory of your thing, I want you to go there, then lib, then look for the candy file. That's what require does. Require relative, it looks for files in relative to where the file is. That's what the relative means. So what require relative is saying is like, hey, from the candy spec, where the candy spec file is, which is in the spec directory. We are going to see that // that says, I want you to go up one, then go into lib and find that candy file. The dot, yep, the dot is exactly how when you in the terminal, when you go out of a directory, it's cd .. That's how that works.
Is there a reason why you would use one over the other, like here specifically? Or?
In general, you should use require. The way these Ruby exercises set up, we use require relative just because like it would just be easier to kind of deal with. In general, you would want to use require. You are going to generally run things from root directory unless we tell you otherwise, because there are very specific circumstances you would use require relative, but in general, we should be using require.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Mike.
No problem. Oh, all right. So first, let me get rid of that because you don't need that no more. Let me run my test again to make sure I've not broken anything, and then I have not. Excellent. And let me, I don't remember the order of this, so I'm just going to go to exercises. All right, so we got the candy. Now it's time for the bag. That cool. That's got some stuff in it. Excellent. I'm just gonna go ahead and make bag.rb file right now and move it over here because I don't want to need it. And like I know that like like creating the bag before I get the error is not technical in TDD, but I personally just like to get all my windows just like set up before I start doing anything. And like at this point, like I know that like, hey, I got a bag test. I'm probably gonna need a bag, and like that's fine. So R spec bag spec, and we see uninitialized constant bag. Cool. Nope. R spec. There we go. Cool. And it says expect bag new empty to be true. And this is a different format than you may be expecting. So when we think about it, right, what does bag.new return?
An object? Like
what kind of object?
An instance of the bag class.
Right. And so this here is exactly the same as if we were to say bag equal bag.new, and then down here we have expect bag.empty. Oh no. Bag.new. Here we have expect bag.empty to be, I don't really like that. It hurts me that there are no friends there. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I also think there's a assertion that's just be true. Right? But let's just do it, let's just match it up. And so this here is functionally the same thing as this, because what we're doing, we're kind of, in this one, we're kind of abstracting this out, right? Whatever bag.new returns, we're just storing in bag. So why not just do the bag.new.empty, right? Is that kind of clear? Look at this abstraction of like, this is the start of that kind of question some people had, like about how we can occasionally chain methods. Bag, lowercase bag here is the same as bag.new. So that's how we get this bag.empty. But like, because this is a local variable, we could just replace this with this, and it does the same thing. Cool. And so who remembers what empty question mark, what method is that? What is that looking for or doing? Antonio?
Yeah, it just is going to tell you if normally we use it I use it on an array and it just tells me if the array is empty.
Yeah, totally, right? And so what this exercise is kind of demonstrating is that yes, also that fur. Is that fur or faux fur? It's a look.
Yeah,
it's a look. It's a whole mood, and I'm here for it.
I think it's faux fur, but it's for Wacky Friday, so I was trying to find something funky.
I think Marla forgot about Wacky Friday. I saw the hands go up, and it was amazing. Yeah, so what we're trying to illustrate here is that we can make our own methods on things, right? Bag is not an array. And so we're thinking like, well, a bag is empty. All right. So like that can be a little confusing because it's like bag candy. And I think that we're kind of hoping that you're kind of picking up on this pattern. Like, well, I have a bag, I have candy. This appears to be Halloween themed. I'm gonna presume that candies go in a bag, right? Because like when I look at this, like we're requiring a bag, requiring candy, I think that we're like, hey, it's probably a thing where this bag is going to hold candy. And so now we have to start thinking like, well, how, like this is kind of does take a leap. I want to call it like a leap of imagination / like we have to make an inference about what's wanted. So I'm thinking like, well, bag new empty is going to be true. And so by definition, I would just do, if I was doing like kind of strict, super small error message TDD, do this. And this is okay to do because it's like at this point, we don't really know where we're going yet. There's different ways we can solve this. So we'll just do this for now. And we're going to take a look at the error messages and see and let this kind of push us forward. All right, so that passes. I'm going to unskip that test, fix this spelling error. It can count the candy in an empty bag. So bag.new.count equals 0. That means that it says to me that like this bag has a attribute with a count that has a number of candies. So like, yeah, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do def initialize, and I'm going to do a count equals 0 and here, count like that, and this should give me that 0, and that still passes. That passes. We got some more skips. That's fine. And so I'm going to keep going. I know that this is not great. I know this is not going to work for everything, but like it's working so far. And right now we're just trying to explore and see where this takes us. Cool. I'm going to save that. And we'll run it again. Undefined method candies for bag. Well, it looks like when we just instantiate a bag, candies is going to be an empty array. All right. Well, we've been this row before. Candies equals empty array. We will add candies here. Cool. I'm going to run that again. And it looks like it's good. No failures. And this is the tricky one. What we do is we remove that. Undefined method, the shovel operator for candy. A lot of these exercises do weird things to prove a point, and to kind of like show you, like, to kind of show you the fact that like in programming, you can do whatever the heck you want. Like the world is your oyster. And I think I recall I was talking about this with Ian yesterday about the independent challenge, how a number of you did to get around that whole conversion of integer to like the number to pounds and weeks. like y'all did some really weird kind of interpolation slash data type conversion in there, and you kind of on your own like really jump through some hoops to get things to work. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I think that it's really cool, like when a student, like not knowing some of the things they can do, leverages the tools that they do know how to use in order to kind of make things happen that were never intended, right? And like when you start doing that, we're kind of illustrating like, hey, you don't always need to find the best tool. You can do a couple things. You can cobble together some methods and things that you do know to get your desired result, or you can kind of attack the program side, the problem sideways, and kind of like get it from a different angle. And so this is like a thing, like, well, we remember what this shovel operator is, right? It's something that we use on arrays. But it's like, but this is a bag. How does this work? A bag is not an array. Do we need to make a bag an array? I'm like, no, we don't need to make a bag an array. And what we're suggesting we do here is that we need to follow the steps that we've been doing all along, right? So Jacob P, when I see undefined method, whatever, what do we usually do to fix that?
Make a method.
Yeah.
Define
right?
a method.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. It's gonna be weird because like y'all have never defined a method with just symbols before. But like, what's stopping us from doing that? Right? I mean, yes, it looks real weird, like because you've never done this before. But like when we think about it, we are doing nothing different from what we've already taught you. No undefined method, we make that method. Cool. I'm going to save it. I'm going to run my test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the error messages that I get push me along. Like it's critically important that we run our tests every single time we do something. We need to always verify that what we're doing is correct. And we also need to verify that what we've done has not broken anything else. I think that is like incredibly dangerous because like I've done many things that have broken other things by accident. Like we always have the best of intentions. So I'm going to run that. And it's going to say wrong number of arguments. Taylor, do you have a question?
Yeah, real quick. Can you name a method literally any sequence of characters that you want, or do the reserved keywords like end,
yeah, the
quit
reserved
and all that?
keywords.
Those are out.
Those are out.
Okay, understood. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. So we have wrong number of arguments. We know what to do with wrong number of arguments, right? I'm going to look at this. I'm going to say, given one expected 0. So this thing here is going to take an argument. And it takes candy, right? It's going to be, the candy's going to win. Oop, that's a 1 too many. Spaces. Yeah. Okay. So now we got a different error message. And it says we expected a candy, but we got empty myth instead. And the thing is that like this is a pattern we're familiar with, like having one object be able to put things into it. Like in the independent challenge, we have the what was it, the animals go in the zoo. Same exact thing here. What we're going to do here is we're going to do candies, and I'm going to shovel in candy, right? Or candies dot push candy. Both are the same thing. Right, we'll just do, I like push better. Then I'm going to go this, and we're on the test, and it passes. So what we've done here is that we have pretty much like replicated the function of the shovel operator within Ruby. And this works like this because like Ruby has that syntactic sugar. What we call it, like, so like as we recall, like you can pass arguments with parens, and like this will work this way. Marla?
Yeah, so is there a reason that it's working this way without like the period before the shovel operator to connect it to bag?
Yep, Ruby lets you do that.
Okay.
Don't ever do this.
Okay.
Like don't ever do this. We're just trying to make the point like you can't.
Gotcha.
Right? That like just because we want to illustrate the point that just because this is something that's weird that you've never seen before, we can still use the error messages that we're getting to just kind of push forward and still come to a solution.
Okay. But
So
we should use the period. It's just, it's not, Ruby will identify it, but it's not practiced.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, cool.
Right. Yeah, cool. Sammy?
If you used the shovel operator instead of push, is it going to get confused because the shovel operator is the same as the shovel method you defined?
It won't, because we're in kind of the scope inside that method already. And it's going to recognize that the shovel operator is running on at candies, which is an array.
Okay.
Yep. That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. There's certainly like this order of precedence that takes place that kind of covers it. Cool. And so we're going to unskip this test here. Run it. And this one, expected false got true. Well, that's easy. I'm a smart person. I'll just make this false, right? That's going to work. That's going to work out for me well, isn't it? And now the other test is passing. The first test is like, no, you can't do that. It's going to be true. So now this means that empty, I need to look at this here, right? And so empty is going to determine if my candy's array is empty or not, right? Because I'm kind of like reading this test, I'm inferring that, saying like, hey, when the bag has no candy, empty is going to be true. When the bag has candy, the empty is going to be false. So we could do if candies equal empty array, return true, else return false. Right? That certainly works. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to run that test, and that passes. This is all less than ideal right now. I'm just gonna, oh man. Let's do one more and then we'll take a Pomodoro break. All right, we're gonna unskip this test and we're gonna run again, and it's gonna say, hey, count candies, it's 0 because this count isn't changing. So what we can do is that here we can also do at count plus equal 1. Right? Every single time we push in a candy, we should be incrementing that. And that passes. Questions to here? Dane?
Yeah, this might be a little bit off, mostly just about like, I guess, proper syntax. I've seen people do like, if you have for that last test that you just had pass, it can count candies. I've seen people just have to equal like the number 1 without the parentheses around it. I've also seen that with like a Boolean, like just to equal and then true without parentheses around it. Yeah. Is that technically wrong, or? I
mean, if it's technically wrong, would error out, right? I like parens. I like parens because I don't know. Parens are like hugs. They hug the thing. And it's like, hey, this belongs here. I'm a generally person who will use parens because I think I want to make sure when I write my tests and things are grouped together, especially in the way that RSpec tests are, I want to be very clear about what's happening, and I want to communicate very clearly that I want whatever is happening in here to essentially belong to this EQ. I want it to be like no question. And I think that, I don't know, I just feel that I process tests in my head easier with parens. I also like using methods over kind of straight things. So like for this be false, I'm like, what is this nonsense? I say that jokingly. I would prefer that to use the full method like this. And so when I run the test, I'm pretty sure that's going to work. Oh, that's different. Yeah. It meant be false or be falsy. So I'm wrong there. So I would probably prefer this, or I try very hard to like tell you all the difference between my preference and what you should do. I don't like B that much unless it's a full thing. So like I would always do, I would do that. Check for strict equality, and that passes. I just like checking like, hey, does it equal this? Done. Yeah, but B sounds better. It feels like more Englishy. So like, I don't know. I've like a lot of the decisions I make like programming are not like, one, they're not set in stone. Like your tastes and your opinions of things will change over time. And I think they should change over time. That's the sign of having an open mind about things. And sometimes it's like it is going to be this kind of weighing of factors. And I like how 2B false sounds, but I hate the fact that it doesn't have parens. But I also like the strict equality of equals. So like right there, I've got like 3 different priorities in my head fighting. And long story short, I don't care. I don't care. I like parentheses. I think it looks cool. That's it. I wish I had a better answer than that. But like I will have irrational preferences for things for no good reason. I'll let you know when they are indeed not irrational. Sammy?
This is a bit of a specific question, but I have run into an issue recently where I'm checking the class of something and I'll try to write to be a like string and it won't work. But if I write to equal string in parentheses, which I've seen it done both ways, it only works for equal and not to be a. Is there a reason that
B is a little different than equal? B only works on certain things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I honestly I don't remember the distinction between the two. If you look at the RSpec docs, there's probably a better explanation about it. Like I said, I don't really use the B. So what these are called, like this EQ, this B, the B method, the equal method, they're called matchers because they're trying to drive some kind of a match. And the B match is not something I use much. I use much of. Like for, let's go back to this, right? Let's say that I was going to write a existence test to be a instance of whatever, like a candy, right? Like I would not do expect candy to be candy. I want to be as specific with my matchers as possible to be an instance of candy. Like that's how I do it. I would use like you want to in general use the most specific matcher you can to make sure that there's not like some weird edge case that you just haven't considered. Yeah. Also, in case you didn't know, there is an alternative to this. You could do, if we wanted to use equal in this case, we do candy.class to equal candy like that. Like that is exactly the same thing.
So if you did to candy.class to, so it would equal, okay. All right, I get it. Sweet, thank you.
Yeah, so that's another way to do it. But usually my preference is this style because it's like to be an instance of. Yes, totally get it. Whereas like expect any class equal, it's like I feel it's like an extra like brain jump to hit that. So that is my preference. But again, personal preference. And I think that and you'll hear me say this a lot when you ask me like, should I do this way or this way? I will say to that when you get to your job, you will do what all your teammates do. Each company has what's called a style guide, and it's very specific. Like, okay, you're going to write Ruby this way, where you're like every test will look like this, and this is how you do it, and that's just the way it is. Because it's like, are you going to be the person on their first day on their job as a junior developer start saying, well, we do it this way? Like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Do what everyone else does. And like, not in general, not in life, but at work, do what other people do. like when it comes to code and code style. It's one of those things where you need to earn the right to kind of say like, hey, can we try this instead? And like for stuff like that, usually it's something they've considered, but they said there's probably reasons why not. There's always reasons why not. Cool. All right. It's 9:39. We're a little overdue for a break. Let's take a Pomodoro break. Let's be back at 9:46. 9:46. And 100% not irrelevant. That is very relevant. And thank you for catching that.
And then just go ahead and repeat everything you just said.
So essentially, okay, you can do that. We have bag here, and bag is a bag item.
I was just being facetious.
I think it's worth repeating regardless. The bag object has a candies method on it, and when we look at the bag, the candies method on the bag will return this array. So bag.candies, is exactly the same thing as an array, and because it is exactly the same thing as array, we have access to the array methods on it. So then we could run first. So bag.candies.first is us getting the first item out of the bag.candies array. And the bag.candies array, I'm sorry, my dog is freaking out because I now have a tail and she thinks it's for her. It is not for her. Like, go away. And so bag.candies.first is going to return us a candy object. And because we have created the candy object to have a type method that returns a string, we can then just put the dot type at the end of that. And we get this string of Hershey's Kisses. Cool. So I'm going to run the test again to make sure I've not broken anything. And that goes. And we're good. And let's move on to the last, I think it's the last one. Yeah, it's the last one. All right. And so this test is going to be asking if it has a particular kind of candy, contains, and I'm saying like, okay, so yeah, we have a bag. We're going to put a Lindt chocolate in this bag, and then we're going to expect that the candy either contains Lindt chocolate. Yeah, we know that's true. I think we're missing a typo there, but it's not going to have nerds, right? So we got the message, undefined method contains. And so we should make the method contains. And I know the contains is going to have that sounds like, yeah. And now I got to solve this problem. And there are a couple of ways we can do this. There are numerals that can do this, but let's do this by hand. When I say by hand, let's do it the old-fashioned way using .each. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to set result equal to false. And so the way I'm thinking is that what I want to do is that I want to go through all the candies. If I have a match for what I'm looking for, then I want to flip that I want to return true. But if I don't find it, it's going to return false, right? And I think that like when we're looking for something, we should assume that we're not going to find it until we do. Right? Because like iterating through is simpler to do it that way. Because like, hey, we're not going to find until we do. Whereas the code to write it, it's like, yeah, it's going to be there unless we don't find it. And then we change it to false. That feels like, excuse me, like first the double negative doesn't feel so good. And I don't know. This is one of the things where it just makes more sense in my mind to do it this way. I think it like looking to make something positive, because like I think that when we think about the real world, if I can't find my keys, my default state is that I don't have my keys. I'm going to look for it. If I do find my keys, then I will have my keys. But if I do not find my keys, I still will not have my keys. Does that make sense? I think that in programming, as we do things, it's really helpful to think about like the real world analog to it. it will kind of like make these things kind of put things in terms that we can kind of understand, because who among us have not lost our keys? I have a tile in my keys because I literally lose my keys every 2 days or so. It's usually in my duvet because I'll get home and I'll just toss my keys in my bed. Why do I do that? I don't know. But I have a solution. I got a magnetic key hook rack for my door, so that's where keys go now. Keys and masks. All right, so we have this result false, and what we're going to do is that we are going to iterate over non-Vandy's candies each do candy, right? Using that good old plural singular pattern. I mean, Matt, I'm glad you have a key hanger, but the thing is that if you don't put the keys on the hanger, then it doesn't do much good. It's taken me like 2 weeks to train myself to put my keys on there. It's difficult. All right. So I know that candies have a type. That is a thing. So if candy.type equal type, and this type down here is coming from the argument over here, we are going to change result equal to true. And result, right? Only and only when we find a match to the type are we going to flip that to true, right? Because every other instance is we're not going to find that type and it's going to remain false. And they all pass. Any questions about this last piece? Marla?
When you are, like, if you didn't have this iteration pattern to follow,
yeah.
Like creating, I guess one of the things that I keep running into is kind of like knowing when to have a method that has an argument and when to not have a method that has an argument.
Yep.
Like at what moments
Good question.
that helps and doesn't help.
Yeah. I think that I would make that decision thinking about what information do I have in this method and what information do I need to send in, right? So when I'm thinking about this contains method, it says to me like, well, I have access to all the candies, and because I have access to the candies, I have access to the type of each candy. What don't I have access to? Like, well, I don't have access to the thing I'm trying to match it up to, right? Because like I like how's the bag gonna know that? So that says to me like, well, that's something I gotta send in.
Okay, thank you.
Antonio?
Yeah, so I can see that with this candies each method, you have an if statement and you want to change the value of the result variable to true if that if statement is true.
Yep.
When you go up to, I can't remember, if you go up a little bit, there's another method where, okay, yeah, so if at candies is equal to an empty array, you actually don't have to have that true and false statement then, right? Because
yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit when we start refactoring.
Okay, got it.
That was intentional. Cool. Other questions? Blake?
Yeah, I'm following along, also trying to kind of match up and make sure there's not any errors. I think I have mine the same as you, but I'm still getting an error and don't know how to fix that error.
Yeah, can you post that in the code help channel? You just want to kind of like kind of focus on this, and we'll get to that when like we'll look at it after class.
Okay.
All right. So at this point, we know that everything's working. And the things that I've done some things in here that I'm not very happy with, right? And we kind of talk about what we want to do when we start refactoring. And so I look at this, and the thing is that this is like a big reason why we have This is kind of like a big reason why we have these tests. This is why we do this, so that these tests have kind of helped us design a thing and guide us along, but they're also they are for verification as well. Like when I start changing things, I still have the test to depend on to make sure that, you know, like, hey, if I make some changes and the tests still pass afterwards, that tells me two things. The first thing is that I have not broken anything and they still work as intended, or two, I wrote some shitty tests. So hopefully we did not write shitty tests, and that means that everything continues to work as intended. Matt?
I'm seeing that there is require rspec at the top, but also rspec.describe. Is there redundancy there, or is something else happening than if I just use rspec.describe?
This is just generally, I like to have the rspec there. It just makes me happy. All right, so I think that let's attack the first one that Antonio was talking about this year, right? Like this is, I don't like this. So usually when I refactor, what I'll do is that I'll have this code over down here first, and then I'll just start typing up above what I'd like it to do. And this one is going to be, I will do candies equal empty array, right? And then what I'll do is that this is because as you remember, how does a method determine what gets returned? Who remembers? Taylor?
Last line of code executed in
Right.
the method.
Right, which is this, right? And what I'm doing here, like why I do this, I put up top and I run it, right? That's still going to pass. This is going to run, and then this is going to run. And this is the kind of this process. And I do this because, like, hey, if this has some kind of fatal error in it, this will error out and quit out before I get to this, right? And so what is, like, by this still passing, I know that whatever I've written up above is good. Like, it's not, let me rephrase, it's not, may not be good but syntactically, I've not made any glaring errors that will cause my program to crash, right? We have that little bit of verification. Cool. My next step is that I'm going to take this and I'm going to put it at the end. Oops. And then I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it again. I see that it still passes. So now because we knew this worked, right? Like this is something we knew worked. Now, when we switch the order, we're letting this get returned. And because this is getting returned and this still passes, I know that this works as intended. And I can just go up here and I can take away that, take away the old code. Some people like to comment it out before they take it away. Just to be playing the safe side, but like here we live life on the edge. We're just ready to delete, and we run it, and we know that this is good, right? We've successfully refactored that out. Personally, I'm not a fan of operators. I will probably do this instead, and I'll run it again to make sure that works. I will say for larger refactors, I'll go through that process of writing the new code up top, do the flip flop. Do the run, you know, that whole process to make sure like things, stuff like replacing that, like I will just do it in place. Like that was me deleting like 5 things and replacing with 6, right? Like for something like that, I'll just go and do and just run the test, make sure I've not screwed up. If I screw up, I'll just hit undo and get back to where I was. Cool. All right. The next piece is more complicated. The next refactor I want to do is that I have this count here. I'm not happy about this count because this is something, the count is based on the candies, and storing the count here as a 0 is essentially duplicating the information we have here in candies. So I want to convert this over so that count will count how many candies there are. So what I'm going to do is I will make a count method. And I will take that away. There. Get rid of that. That's reasonable. And I'll run the test to make sure I've not broken anything. And I've not broken anything. So I've changed this kind of all this stuff to rely on to take away that instance variable. The main reason I did that is because the count of candies is very tightly bound to the candies. It is what I would call a calculated value as opposed to an attribute. And I think that when we do some kind of math or calculation on an existing attribute, that should be remain a method. Instance variables we want to avoid the use of instance variables if possible. They are like resource intensive, and they should only really be used to hold attribute to something. The other downside to structuring things the way we had it before was that every single time we added a candy, we had to increment that count, right? And this gets more complicated because, if I ever have a method that takes candy out, I also have to remember to decrement the count, to subtract one from the count. And so here's this question. If down the road, we're adding to this code and the count stops working, we now have potentially at minimum 3 places to check if the count is working out. We got to check the initialize, how's the count started? We have to check hey, are we adding to the count every single time we add a candy? We now have to check, are we subtracting from the count properly whenever we are removing candy? And however other many situations where you may modify the count of the candy. What if the candy touches some radioactive goo and it starts multiplying? Maybe that's a thing that happens to candy. I don't know. Candy doesn't last too long in my apartment. This is another place where we have to check and make sure we are doing this math correctly, right? Rather than just hey, we've got to count how many things are in there. We're done. Going to calculate, and in general, going to calculate the value of something is going to be quicker than storing it forever. Because you may check the number, you may check the count, you may never check the count. However, if you are storing the count, that information is always using some kind of computing resource. And don't do that. We can also change this here. We can also change there is other enumerables that you can learn about that we will, I don't know if we talk about this one in particular, but I'll show it to you anyway. At candies.any do candy.type equal candy. This is a special kind of enumerable. This one will return true or false. What this does is that it will iterate through the candies array, and it will run the block. If any time the block returns true, this will return true. This enumerable will return true. And just let me run the test to make sure this works properly. No. Nope, sorry. This is a typo on my part. Candy type equals type. Yep, that passes. And so anytime, if for the any enumerable, it's going to iterate through and it is going to run the block. If the block ever returns true for any item in that collection, the whole enumerable will return true. If the block never returns true at any point, it will return false. There are similar ones. There's similar enumerals. There's all. And as you can presume, if the block always returns true, that will return true. There is none. Question mark. There is one, O-N-E. That will return true if there is one and only one. And there may be more. I'm not 100% sure, but those are the ones that I usually use. I usually say, yeah, it's all, none, some. Why isn't there a sum? And no, any is essentially some. and any is a little more clear than some. Cool. Any questions? Shall we move on to the next one? Costume. Costume spec. I'm going to code lib. Oh, take the step. I'm here anyway. Oops. Nope. Cool. I mean, this one is relatively, essentially almost the same as Candy. That's the one. So we're just gonna do this real quick. Class costume def initialize. Almost spelled initialize wrong, and we would have been here for hours. Hands today. It's good. This should make both pass. Cool. I expect there not to be too much because this is essentially identical to the Candy spec, but it allows us to get to the hard part. Or Twitter.rb. Cool. I'm just going to make the class while we're here. Did I spell that wrong? I don't think I did. Cool. Wrong number arguments. Okay. So wrong number arguments. I see that a trick-or-treater, it's the wrong number is given 1, expected 0, line 10. So it's failing out in this one here. And we are seeing that we are initializing a trick-or-treater as a costume. It gets initialized to the costume. So def init all initialize costume. Cool. And undefined method dressed up as. Cool. Right. Run test again. And we expect the cowboy got nil, right? And so that means that I'm thinking like, okay, so this is going to grab the costume style, was it? Yeah, style. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to grab the costume dot style, right? Because I have access to that because we initialized the trick-or-treater and we sent in a costume object, which we stored in the @costume instance variable. Because I have access to that costume instance variable, I have access to its style, the cowboy, as a part, because I have the reader method on that. And I kind of want to note that, yeah, like what I'm doing here is like I've not created an add a reader because I don't need an add a reader. At no point in here did I ask for, did this spec, well, so far the spec hasn't asked for the costume object back, so I don't need the costume object. I just need that style back, and I've made a method to give me that. And so if I run this test, if I've not made any glaring errors, that passes. This one should be kind of the same thing. Cool, that passes. Any questions so far? All right. So has the empty bag by default, right? So, and this is like we see here, like this is a little shortcut, right? Remember before we did that whole bag equal bag dot new, same thing. We're just passing a new costume in here. And we're expecting bag empty to be true, right? And so this kind of says to me that like a trick-or-treater has a bag. And then, you know, as we recall, that bag has a method on it called empty. So that means like because we are not passing a bag to, we're not passing a bag to the trick-or-treater. That means the trick-or-treater is now responsible for making a bag. So I would do require. Actually, I should run the test first. I am getting ahead of myself. Oops. Let's skip it. Undefined method bag, right? And so when I think about it, like the trick-or-treater should be responsible for making a bag. So we're going to do require. Bag. And what we'll do is that bag equal bag dot new. And we're going to make an adder reader for the bag. We run the test. That passes. Pretty sure there's going to be questions about what I've done here. Brenna?
So in order to, let me see if I can, so the at costume is accessing the info from the costume class that we created.
No, at costume is storing the costume because the costume is getting passed in here.
Okay.
Right. So when we think about this, I really kind of want you to get into this idea that passing an object through initialize like this through .new is no different from the stuff you've passed strings in, right?
Yeah.
Strings, you pass strings in, strings have methods. Like the only difference here is that we're passing in a class that we've made.
Okay.
But like technically there's no difference. Like the Ruby doesn't care if it's costume, doesn't care if it's string, it doesn't care if it's array, it doesn't care if it's a hash. So costume is a costume object. Costume, if I were to type in here puts at costume.class, it would just be costume.
Okay.
Right. And then this method dressed up as is like, hey, I have a costume object. What style? That's going to be a string, returns that.
Okay. And then, so when you did the bag at bag.new, that's creating the object from the bag class.
Yep. We're instantiating instance of bag and storing it in the trick-or-treater.
And then for the require lib.bag, that is allowing us to grab from there.
Yep. This is what gives us the ability to go create a new instance of bag. Right? Like, think about it. In your tests, do you not require things in so you can create new instances of them in your test? This is the same thing.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
Right. Elliot?
I'm kind of wondering a little bit about scope for the at bag equals bag dot new. If you were to put that at the, like, say outside of the class in the bottom of the bag dot RB, like where you're grabbing the require from, would you still need to run like create an instance variable for it?
Like,
it's
so
already created.
You should not put code outside the class definition.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, totally, but I'm just wondering, would it work? Like, just for understanding the scope of how these are.
It depends on how you run it, because it's like, because like for this, we're not running trick-or-treater.rb. Right. So like, so like the trick-or-treater would not know about the bag because it would sit outside of it. You just have a bag that's not connected to anything. It would just like it would just be like living set to whatever variable you set it to. And the trick-or-treater class would not have access to it. It would not be within its scope. It would be in the global scope.
Okay. So then for a like runner file, I actually have no idea what I'm trying to ask there. I'm done.
All right, we can circle back. We can circle back if it gets to you. Marla.
Okay, so initializing bag in this initialize method, and then passing in costume. Are we kind of doing the same thing? Like, could you initialize a costume instance and then you wouldn't have to initialize it in a test? Like, is that basically?
You can. You certainly can, but the test said like this is the way it's going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, when the test isn't set up and we're just like making it ourselves.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Is totally fine.
Yeah, you do whatever you want. You do whatever. Well, you don't do whatever you want. You do whatever makes sense at the time.
Okay.
Right? And there are going to be situations where it is appropriate for the bag to trick. Like there's times where it's appropriate to initialize the object inside, and sometimes, it's going to be something where it's initialized outside. It just depends on like how things are set up and what you're supposed to do. Like the big picture is that like sometimes you don't get to decide how information comes in. You got to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right. So like it could be like, well, nope, you're getting a costume object. That's just the way it is.
Gotcha. But so like as we're kind of creating these projects from scratch, I guess, is there a reason that like we would choose one over the other? Like, is there any strategic difference?
It's really situational. Like it really depends on how you've designed the whole thing to work together as a whole. That would inform that decision for you.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Anything else? Jacob?
Yeah, one last question about the require. Like my code was set up exactly the same as far as the initialize goes in the adder reader. And on my test passed, but I didn't require that file in my actual trick-or-treater RB. Is it passing because it's required in the R spec?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. All right, let's take a break. Let's be back at 10:26. Resume recording. Fantastic. All right. Empty bag by default. Undefined method has candy. We've been down this road before. Def has candy. Right? Makes sense. I see the number of onesies is growing. I approve this. I don't have my hood up because these headphones, they're just not very comfortable. So I think that yeah, this will return true if it has candy, it returns false if it doesn't. And so I think the initial instinct here is we would do at bag.candies.empty, right? Does that seem reasonable? Right, we have a bag. The bag inside has a candies, which is an array, and we're asking if it's empty on that, right? We're kind of chaining these things along, and that should work. To be false. Oh, empty is true. Has candy. No, wait. I'm getting, so this is why negatives are so much fun. Has candy. So I'm saying that no, it has no candy, but it's asking if it doesn't have candy. So I gotta flip that around. So two ways you do this. I'm not a fan of that. Bag.candies does not equal. And that passes. And I'm going to skip this. So this we're checking the other side of that, and that passes. But this is like gross, because we're kind of operating on this array that sits in bag, right? We're kind of like going 2 levels deep. And this is a thing called the Law of Demeter. And the Law of Demeter essentially says we don't want to reach through objects to get to other things. Like, we should only be talking to the immediate adjacent objects. So what I'm saying is, if we look at bag, we have this method called empty that'll test it as candies, right? And so what I'm going to do is that I want the bag to be, let me kind of back this up, right? Right now, as this code sits, the trick-or-treater class in this has candy method is going into the bag object, into that array, and then making the determination or not if it has candies inside. Do you see what I'm saying there? What this code is doing right now is it's taking the bag class, going into the bag class to access the candies array inside that bag class, and then determining if there are candies in it. This is not good, because the trick-or-treater should not be responsible for doing this kinds of things. Like whether a bag has candy or not is not the responsibility of the trick-or-treater. Whose responsibility do we think it is?
The bag.
Yeah, bag, right? So what I'm saying is that we're a little pressed for time. So ordinarily I would write a test for this first, but I'm not going to kind of like, because I want to get to this idea. It should be the bag's responsibility to tell us if it has candies or not. So I'm going to make a method here. Def has candy. And we can determine by a candy, couple of ways we can do that. Count. Does that make sense? If there's more than 0 candies in a bag, you do it. Other alternatives, we could do count in 0 candy. That's another thing too. Not candies are not empty. I don't like that too much because of the negatives that I always get wrapped around. But we'll just do this for now, because I think that's like, it's clear to everyone. Yeah, we have more than 0 candies. That means we got candies, right? And so here we have this has candy method. Then we go back to trick-or-treater. We change this to at bag dot has candy. And that passes. So the big lesson here is that we don't want to reach too far into things to grab things, because it is not the job of the trick-or-treater to know about the candies that a bag contains. It is the job of the bag to know things about candies. And so the trick-or-treater will only ask the bag, hey bag, got candies? And the bag will respond. A good sign of this is like when we have too many dots. We're going down like this dot or after dot after dot after dot in like this kind of chain of methods. That's usually a sign that we're reaching too deep and we need to break out these helper methods. Any questions? Cool. And we see here it can count candies. And this is going to be essentially the same kind of thing where we have a candy count. Def candy count. And again, we could do at bag.candies.count, right? Because at bag is the bag, at bag.candies is that array of candies, and we're going to count for it. But again, this is this is making the responsibility of counting the individual candies to the trick-or-treater, which is no. Like, can you imagine what it would be like if we were kids, and when we were kids, we had a bag that could just look at and it would tell us how many candies we had? Like, that would be amazing. That just sounds like the most amazing thing on the planet. And this is the same idea. Like, let us live the life that our past selves only dreamt about. And so what we're going to do is that I know that my bag has a count method. So, oops. So I'm just going to go bag count. I'm going to ask the bag, hey, how many candies you got? You got stuff. That passes. What's the last one? Oh, eat candy. So this is what we were talking about earlier, right? If we had not refactored our bag, we now have to have presumably in our eat method, it would we would have to like decrement the thing as well, which gets messy. So I am going to run it with undefined method eat. And so def eat. Right. And we think about this the same thing, like what we could potentially do is we just want to remove it. Like, again, this is a bit of a contrived example because I think in my mind, like if I was doing this for real, the trick-or-treater would have a stomach class that holds the candies you've eaten, but like we're not going there yet. Stomach class. That's what and so what I could, if we're just not following the law of Demeter, we'd be doing something like at bag.candies.pop, right? Pop will just pull out the last candy. Last one out, right? First in, first out. First in, last out. Right? But again, like kind of going back to this theme that we've been talking about, we want to avoid this. We don't want to operate directly on this thing. So we can do a little bit. Have we used this term with you? Dream-driven development. Dream-driven development. Alliteration is my favorite thing, but also my greatest enemy. Is this idea of like, why don't we write code the way we'd like it to work, and then we just make it happen, right? And so in just kind of like English language words, what is a bag doing when I want to eat? What do we think? What do we want to name it? Like what we call it? Like, what does a bag do when we eat a candy? Like in my mind, it's like remove candy, right? A bag should have a remove candy method. Like you're not gonna, I don't feel that you would give the bag an eat method like that one. It's like it sounds like you're giving candy to the bag to eat, and that gets confusing. A bag should not be eating candy, but you can remove candy from a bag. So I would call it remove candy, and again, like, this is not the only name it could be. You could say bag dot you call the method give candy. That sounds reasonable as well. It doesn't really matter, but like we want to make sure that like the name that we give the method makes sense, because the trick-or-treater and the bag kind of belong together. But like some of the long-term thinking we should be doing is like, hey, like this bag could potentially be used with other things. What if like technically it's a bag of candy? Like what if toddler Mike were to live out his grandest dreams and become a candy pirate? And the candy pirate needs a candy bag, right? And this bag class would still work. That's a stretch, but I always just want to say the words candy pirate. That sounds like an amazing job. We want this to work. So what I'm going to do is that we're going to kind of like dream drive this, right? Bag, remove candy, right? And if I run my test, it's going to say like, hey, bag doesn't have a remove candy method. I'm like, well, if I don't have a remove candy method, I will just make a remove candy method. And I go to my bag. I'll put it below here because it feels like they kind of go together. Def remove candy. And this will be at candies.pop. And this should do the thing. No, undefined method eat. Oh, it's because I didn't save it. That all passes. Big picture, you can write whatever methods you want. You can call whatever you want. Like you can do the thing. Like these things all work. Like this all passes. Questions? You may have noticed that in the bag, I just kind of put this method right under here. The order of a method in here doesn't really matter. Usually things go in order as you do them. Some people may choose to reorganize them. There are different strategies when it comes to reorganization. Like you might want to put things together that kind of makes sense, like this add candy and root candy, that feels like they go together. Some people alphabetize. That feels weird to me, but like you do you. I think that the chronological order the chronological order of methods is probably a lot of people's default ones, because like that also communicates things, right? Like you can like if things are in that chronological order, you can kind of determine like, hey, this is how this class evolved. Like this is how we kind of built it, and you get some kind of gain some insight from that. Antonio?
Yeah, this is not related to the last thing we did. I just wanted to clarify an initialize method. I know it's not necessarily always required.
Yeah.
But I guess for the sake of our project, would you say it's required in all classes, or is it just like required if we can prove that it's required? And I guess a good example of this is when we call on our game class, for instance, or we call on like the runner file, which calls on a game class.
Without knowing the particular instances of it, like I cannot say if if all your classes need it, if all your classes don't need it. The only thing I want to say about initialize is that initialize is a method just like any other. The only thing that makes initialize special is that it is run automatically when we instantiate a new object from that class. So potentially you could write your project in a way that every single class has an initialize method. You could also potentially write your project in a way where none of your objects have an initialize method. That I think that would probably be a little harder to do. But I would not assign a value judgment to how many did and how many not. It is just what it is. And I think that like we can have a discussion when we see it and like see how this all works. There is no not having initialized method or having initialized method is not good or bad. It's just what it is. Sometimes you'll need it, sometimes you won't. Anything else? What else? Elliot?
So I'm gonna try to ask this question right.
Sure.
I'm not sure if it'll come off right, but so with when you use like you initialize a class, like with under damn, I don't know. Ask this.
We can circle back again.
It's
up to you. We can circle back. Also, the code help channel is if it comes up to you later, like if you'd like to try now, that's cool too.
I'll try one more time. If I can't get it, I'll just
it's fine.
Do it later.
We'll try.
So within a test, so if you
is there something that I can scroll to kind of help you?
Yeah, scroll up on your not the spec file, the trick or treat RB file.
Yep, we're at the top.
Oh yeah, at the top. Okay. So for like the at bag is equal to bag.new under your def initialize.
Mm-hmm.
So say that's something like kind of like a message in a way.
Yeah.
Like a message class.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to test that, it's printing out on the terminal that I have, like it's printing it twice, like the message twice. Is there a reason that it would be printing twice and not once? Because I'm also having to initialize the bag in the test to get it to pass? Like it passes, but it prints 2 times.
Not sure without taking a closer look.
Okay, I'll do this later.
Okay.
I'm gonna keep looking into it. Sorry.
It's all right. Jacob?
So considering that you can have a class and you can have that class like initialize another class in it
Yeah.
as part of like the definitionalize.
Yeah.
Would it be crunchy or like bad practice if like let's say you run that class the first time, it makes a new class in it, and then you kind of like loop through, and then the next time that you call on that class again, if you have like if and statements there to check to see if there's already like an initialized class, and to go ahead and like either make one or just use what's already initialized.
Well, the thing is that if you initialize only runs when you create a new instance of an object. So what's happening is that if you create a new instance, that's a separate object. So it'll still create, but like the two will now be completely separate beings.
Oh, okay. I was thinking about that.
Yeah, they're gonna like, again, initialize in general just only runs the one time. Right, so it's only gonna do that once, and if you do it again, you'll essentially be creating a different object, and there'll be 2 different things.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking then is, so that class that you're initializing in the class, like the whole hierarchy here, the class you're initializing in the class, that doesn't just exist within like
it only exists inside that instance of what you've just initialized.
Okay. Okay, makes sense.
Right?
So I think I tried to articulate it in the code help yesterday, and I think I understand it, but just to, I guess, reiterate in my head. So if we were in, let's say, the bag class, and we wanted to know if that bag had a trick-or-treater, we wouldn't want to like call back to the trick-or-treater. It can't. Okay.
Right, because a trick-or-treater, we initialize the bag, right? So it has a reference on which it can handle the bag. But the bag, how does the bag know where it came from whence it came? How can it tell?
Yeah, okay.
It's a good thing you'll find out how to do that in week 4. 4? Yeah. We'll talk about that in week 4.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a very special instance where we talk about like when we want to go upwards. Generally, you only go downwards. Right? It's like I use the simile of the Russian nesting dolls all the time. It's like does the smaller one know about the big one? Like, no, it does not. But you have access to like things within. If you would like a lot, if you are bored and would like to dig into this topic of items containing items on the backend Mod 1 projects page, there is a project called Jungle Beats, which is probably my favorite project at Turing of all time. If any of you want to tackle that and want to talk about it, I would love it. It's like my favorite topic on this planet. It's also super useful because I think it's a very common interview question too. The idea is covered in Jungle Beat. And if you don't decide to do Jungle Beat now, we're probably going to revisit in Module 3. So you're not missing out if you don't look at it now. Well, anything else? All right, if that's it, we'll give you the extra time left over to project, retro, and re-DTR. So meet with your project partner, go over this past week, what's worked well, what's not worked well, et cetera, kind of like the retro format. And also, I really, really emphasize this. Take the time to read DTR, like visit your DTR memo, like, hey, do we need to change anything? Have we been living up to what we said we've been doing? Things like that. And as you all agreed to before this class over the weekend, please do take the time to read over the the Boolean logic lesson plan. You do not need to like know everything in there by heart. As long as you get the gist and like, okay, I get what's happening. Maybe for funsies, do a couple of truth tables. I will be happy. Corinna?
So I wanted to clarify in the DTR, it has that we would submit written feedback.
Yep.
Next week.
Yeah.
Is that just like when our projects is due have something typed up about our?
We're going to give you some time to do that next week, and we'll talk more about it next week.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ted?
Where's the jungle beat that you're talking about?
It's in the back end. Let me find it. I'll just find the link real quick. Projects. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there it is. I see it.
Oh, you see it? I'll just post it. I have it, so I'll just post it in the channel.
In the extension projects.
For funsies. Yep. It's probably like my favorite thing in the world. So there's also a progression. If you feel if you finish Jungle Beat and are like victory tastes mild to the undefeated, the next progression is Date Night, which is above, and then Complete Me is this project's final form. They all they don't literally build off each other, but they take the same idea and go deeper. So Jungle Beat's kind of like your level 1. Your Date Night is like Jungle Beat plus, and Complete Me is essentially Jungle Beat Extreme. Antonio?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the schedule for the rest of the day. So it looks like we have project work time right after lunch. Does that mean just look out for a Slack with the attendance?
Yep.
And then there isn't really anything posted under community collaboration.
Yep, that should be announced in the announcements channel.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep. All right, if that's it, goodbye. We'll see you, talk to you later. One last note, like if you have questions dealing with the project over the weekend, post first in your code help channel and then DM us if you need to. We will be responding over the weekend, but just not like immediately as if it was during the day. But we will be around on Slack intermittently. All right, toodles.